the qualification.
Can you speak to that?
Retirement systems. So the chair calls Porter Wilson, Executive Director of the Employee Retirement System, to follow the panel of asked.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, appreciate the opportunity to be here. Bring it down to earth a little bit. Are the Employees Retirement System of Texas. I'm Porter Wilson, the Executive Director. Just in the way of a reminder, we administer 4 pension plans, 3 of which are pre-funded, 1 of which is pay-as-you-go. I'll be talking about the 3 pre-funded plans today. And first of all, I'm going to talk about the largest of those, the main ERS plan. And if you'll recall last legislative session when I appeared before you, that pension plan was not in a good place. It was actually on a path to running out of money. Currently has about $34 billion in assets. Those were set to be depleted over the coming 30 or 40 years. We presented with you a report card that was based off of our funding policy that the Board of Trustees has adopted, that really targeted a number of goals that should be sought to obtain. And you can see on page 2 that report card. On the left is what we brought you. You can see many of the goals had X's in them, meaning that they were not being met. But as of today, we're meeting all of those, or on the path to meeting them, covering the normal cost, not having a depletion date, actually getting the fund actuarially sound, which means being able to pay off of all of its liabilities over a reasonable period of time. That is determined in statute as 31 years. Our board actually thinks you should have a plan to pay that off in a shorter period of time before you really consider yourself in a strong financial position, and that would be closer to 20 years. And so, again, we're on a path to meeting all of those and set to be 100% funded, no unfunded liability by 2054. Of course, you're all familiar with Senate Bill 321, which was really the main piece of legislation, along with the supplemental appropriations bill that set forth that path. It really was composed of 2 pieces. One is the legacy payment, and that is the piece that takes the $14 billion in unfunded liability and puts that on a payment plan to pay that out over the next 33 years, now 32 years and counting. That's an actuarially determined legacy payment. In the current budget, it's $510 million. And we'll be coming to you with an adjustment to that number next legislative session, but it should be right around plus, close to the $500 million. In addition to that was the creation of a new retirement benefit for employees who started for the state starting last Thursday on September 1st. It's a cash balance plan. Just a quick reminder, I don't have to go over that with you, but again, I think the important things to reinforce is this does provide a lifetime benefit for those new employees. It's based on a cash balance, a different calculation, but it does provide a lifetime benefit for them. Key to some of our recruitment efforts with new employees is the contribution rate on the part of the employees is 6% as opposed to 9.5%, which for Social Security participating employees is a high contribution rate at 9.5%. That 6 is more in line with where it should be. There's shorter vesting periods and matching that really provide what I think will be a dynamic and really positive benefit for new employees as they come. I will report to you that we've been working to implement this. Had to make some system changes to accommodate, but successfully launched last Thursday, enrolling our first participants on September 1st. I can tell you that somewhat poetically, the first enrollee was a TxDOT employee. That's poetic because the original legislation back in 1947, 75 years ago, was really at the initiative of engineers at the department, at the Highway Department at that point in 1947. So the fact that they would have the first enrollee in this new program was somewhat poetic. As it relates to the legacy payment, again, I just wanted to sort of point out on slide 4, the good news is we're not running out of money and creating a much more expensive system that would have to be paid as you go, about 4 times more expensive. But there are still opportunity to save some of the interest payments. Right now, that unfunded liability is set to be paid off by 2054. But this slide just shows, again, some opportunities. If that payment were to be increased by about $90 million up to $600 million, you would save $4 billion, more or less, over the lifetime of those payments. Conversely, you went up to $750 million, you would save $8 billion over the lifetime of those payments. Not any different than paying off your house on a 15-year mortgage as opposed to a 30-year mortgage. You save a lot, obviously, in those interest payments. There's still some work to be done, however, and that's what I really want to highlight here with the next couple of slides. We have 2 other pre-funded plans, the Law Enforcement and Custodial Officer Supplemental Plan, and the Judicial Retirement System Fund, which is for those judges who came to the bench in fiscal year 1986 and beyond. I'll start with the LECOS Fund. Just to remind you, that is your law enforcement, that's your DPS troopers, your game wardens, your TABC agents, and then your correctional officers, your TDCJ prison guards. Those folks also participate in the main fund that we were just talking about. About 80% of their benefit comes from the main fund. 20% additional benefit comes from this supplemental retirement fund. And there are about 77,000 participants that are in that supplemental fund that are also in the main fund. And then for the judicial retirement system, different kind of program, much smaller, 1,300 members and retirees, beneficiaries in that program, so much smaller plan, and a bit of a different design plan, looking to bring people in a legal career to the bench, probably later in their career, so different vesting, different benefit calculations. But both of those programs are like the ERS fund last session, on a path to depletion. Same sort of report card that we showed a moment ago on page 6 sort of hits all of the sort of the elements in our funding policy that are important. Probably the most concerning to start off with is we're not even covering the normal cost for these programs. That is just the inherent basic cost of the program, not even being covered. And so even if we were to pay off the unfunded liability, which you can see for LECOS is $650 million or so, you would immediately start generating new unfunded liability because the cost of the plan, the inherent cost of the plan, isn't even being met. And the same is said with JRS2. Again, you can see the unfunded liability much smaller. For ERS, we were talking $14 billion. Here, we're talking $95 million on this plan. And for LECOS, as I said, it's about $650 million. So since, again, not covering the normal cost, we have a depletion date, clearly not covering the actuarially sound contribution rate, and certainly not meeting in that shorter 20-year window that you'd want to have that paying off in really the best scenario. So our request coming into next session, we've just finalized and submitted our legislative appropriations request. More to come, I know, on that when we get to session, but preview of that is it's really, for both of these plans, is sort of a 2-step process is what we're recommending. First of all, cover the normal cost. That's the first thing that needs to happen. And for the LECOS plan, that's a 1% increase in the contribution. It's about $20 million an annual cost. And on the JRS side too, JRS2 side rather, that's a little over a 3.5% increase, about a $3 million a year payment. So get the contribution strategy right for both of those so that they're covering the normal cost. And then, in addition to that, put together a plan to pay off the unfunded liability. And that can be done in a couple of different ways. That could be a contribution as a percentage of payroll. So 1.89% increase just annually would pay that off over a 31-year period for LECOS. And you can see there the JRS2 is a 4% plus increase for about $4 million a year. That would pay that off again over that 31-year period, and you can kind of see what that cost would be for annually. You could also choose to do this with one-time payments or some multiple year payments. So you could, again, first step, cover the normal cost. That's ongoing. And then once that is set, then you could pay off the unfunded liability. Page 8 shows what those are. You could do a one-time payment of $750 million or a one-time payment of 105. You could pay that over 2 payments, 4 payments, whatever you want. We could adjust those, but this was just an example of a way a couple of different ways you could do that. That is the last slide for my prepared remarks, but I'm obviously happy to answer questions as well, Mr. Chairman.
All right. They were quick. Representative Schaefer?
Thank you. What is your, I guess, your assumed rate of return for your funds?
Sure, it's 7%.
Okay, and how does that reflect actual rate of returns right now?
It's actually somewhat lower than our actual rate of return over the long period of time. So when you look at our, again, longer term investments, our investment policy statement really says we should be looking at 5-year, but even longer. And our most recent numbers that I got was we were closer to 8% on our 5-year rate of return, and it was, I think, for our 5, 10, and 20-year rates of return, each one of those were closer to 8%. Obviously, last year was a great year,
Sorry, I'm helping my partner out with some technology here. So,
yes.
so you feel like we have a realistic rate of return pegged?
I do. We've just gone through an asset liability study with our board that met back in August, and that was one of the things that they were looking at. What are our short-term and long-term liability projections? What is our asset allocation? What are we investing in? And what would we expect our investments to return in both the near term, but also the long term? And the conclusion by our investment consultants as well as our actuaries has been that 7% really is a reasonable assumption and is in line with many of our peers as well. Not that, again, we all have sort of different liability sort of projections for each pension fund, but generally we're there with peers in there, and it's that's I think is a solid, sound return assumption for us.
Since unfunded liabilities represent future taxation,
yes,
if you are speaking to policymakers who may need to deal with a budget surplus, from a future liability perspective and the employees' retirement system, what would be the most impactful way for us to reduce future liabilities?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've done that with the creation of Group 4. Again, Group 4 is a different risk profile, future risk profile. So the participants in that plan are putting in their contributions. Contributions are growing at a guaranteed 4% every year. So while we're managing to a 7% return, the funds, the accounts themselves are guaranteed a 4% return. And then anything that we get over that 4%, we'll assume 3% because we're managing to 7%, we would split 50-50 with the participants. So if we were to hit 7% every year, like clockwork, which we know won't happen, the member would get a 4% guarantee, but they would also then get gain sharing of 1.5%. So you've sort of shifted the risk a bit to a better shared sort of risk profile there for your new Group 4. So I think that was significant. The other piece is to again start paying off the unfunded liability, which you're on a path to doing. As I said, the quicker you pay that off, the less it costs future generations in interest payments. And so the quicker you can pay that off, you can actually save. And that's why the legacy payments were so important, because had we run out of funds, the pension fund, it would have cost 4 times the amount just to pay for existing liabilities. And so
to be clear, if we were to put some kind of a lump sum payment into the system this next session, that would save us tax dollars in the future.
Yes, sir, that is correct. Absolutely.
Okay. Shift topics just a second to proxy voting.
Yes, sir.
All right. Oil and gas sector, very important to the state of Texas. There's been some issues with the way ERS has implemented proxy voting with respect to board policies, particularly at Exxon, that would be very damaging to the Texas oil and gas sector. Can you speak to that?
I can. I mean, the first thing I'll say is that, with respect to proxy voting, some of the proxy votes that have been publicized of late are, without equivocation, not indicative of an activist investor agenda on the part of ERS, the board, at all. Not at all. They were the result of what I will call a series of sort of administrative errors that we have put in place, some key controls to ensure that they don't happen again. Again, it was unfortunate, but it's something that I feel we've really come a long way since those votes in ensuring that our proxy votes are cast in line with our fiduciary responsibility. And my words can only tell you so much. Our actions are even more important. Of the $34 billion trust fund, we have over 5%, 5.67% invested in energy, of which 40% of that is invested in exploration and production. I mean, energy is a significant investment for us, and that's not because we are pro or anti-ESG. It's because that's what we see as being good, prudent investment opportunities for our trust fund, which is our fiduciary responsibility. And so, yes, those votes were made, unfortunately, and have been distracting from who we are and what our objective is, and I apologize for that, and we'll own that.
Well, let me
We're
ask
putting in place controls to make sure they don't happen again.
So Institutional Shareholder Services is who we use, is that correct?
That is correct.
Did we know, did y'all know beforehand that they were going to do that?
On the
ExxonMobil.
on the ExxonMobil on the board vote, or on the
board vote.
On the board vote, I'm not aware of what we knew on that one. The one that we've talked more recently about have been some of these divestments or the prohibitions against investing in or loaning money to oil and gas production companies. We did not know that those were being cast beforehand. On the board vote, I'm not sure, but I'll have to check and get back to you on that. I will say that I was not aware of those, and had I been, we would have clearly cast them differently. In line, 90% of our votes are cast, 95% of our votes probably cast consistent with management. So it's of the 30,000 proxies that we vote every year, the vast majority of them are voted with management. That one, again, I'd have to get back to you on the most recent ones on lending. Had no idea about those, and I believe those were cast in error. But we put those.
So what going forward? What can you tell us what's going to be done differently?
Sure. We've so ISS casts our votes. We don't delegate them the right to vote them. We delegate them the administrative responsibility to cast them. And so we have a set of policies that guide how they should vote those. Most of them are voted automatically when there is most of them, there aren't any questions about how the proxies need to be voted, and the policy is fairly clear. When it's not clear, the expectation is that they ask us before they cast the vote. They refer them, is what it's called, that they would refer them. We now have a stewardship committee that will take a look at those and ensure that we're voting those consistent with our policy that our board has adopted on how these should be voted, which is to say that they should be voted only in the financial interest of the trust, period. And we'll be casting those as such in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Porter. Is there any members that have, Representative Howard.
Thank you. I want to talk about the benefit enhancements a bit because I always need to be re-educated about this. But talk to me about what we would be looking at here in terms of what we now have in place to be able to either do a COLA, 13th check, whatever the options might be here. So just, if you could just start with that.
Absolutely. So just in the way of sort of level setting here, the pension fund has to be sound before a cost of living or any sort of benefit enhancement can ever be considered. And the pension fund has to be sound, continue to be sound after the payment of that benefit has been executed. So if it's pre-funded, that's fine, but if it comes out of the trust fund, the net effect has to be that the pension still has to be sound, be able to pay its liabilities under 31 years once that payment has been made.
And just, if
Yes.
can you tell me what that amount might be if it was pre-funded?
For which one?
For the 13th check?
So, for a 13th check, the cost is about $240 million. So it's 1 month's payroll is what that would be. That is without any sort of limitations, without any that's 100% of 1 month's payroll, without the person that retired yesterday, the person that retired 20 years ago. That is payroll. So you can cut that cost down a bit if you wanted to focus it, but the high level cost is approximately $240 million. And you would need to, again, if that were pre-funded, you just need to be at 31 years, and that could be paid. If you needed to, wanted that to be paid from within the trust, you need to get a little clear of that by a couple of years probably in order for it to be.
So it'd be advantageous to pre-fund it?
It would be, yes. Pre-funding it, you could effectively do it once you hit right at 31 years.
And do I understand it correctly that the 31 years is something that's in statute, that's not necessarily the way it's done everywhere else?
That's correct. It's in statute that says that benefit enhancement can't be provided unless the fund is actuarially sound, and that definition for actually sound is set in statute.
And what is kind of the standard outside of Texas then?
It's a great question. I don't know. I think our board.
More than, less than, close to 31?
I think 31 years was set because it was sort of standard. Again, our board policy would say you really shouldn't be looking at providing benefit enhancements until you're closer to 20 years. But, and that's just because you would look, again, the average working life of an employee in state government is about 21 years. And so our board's funding policy says that you should really consider the fund in a strong financial position when unfunded liability is able to be paid off in less than 20 years.
So with what you've shown us here, I believe we're supposed to be, we actuarially sound 2054.
Well, we'll be 100% funded in 2054. You'll be actuarially sound in, we'll say, it's in a year or two. Yes.
In about 2 years?
In about a year or two, that's correct.
A year or two. And so at that point is when we could do the 13th check.
That's correct.
So in terms of anticipating our next 2-year budget, is there an opportunity in that budgeting process to assume that we will be at that point so that we can pre-fund if we choose to do that?
Yes.
The 13th check.
Yes, we would expect that you will be actuarially sound when we come next session. Again, we're looking at what our returns were for last year. We'll have a new actuarial evaluation that will be done in December, and that will inform an update that we'll provide to you when we're here in January or February. But expectation would be with the way the legacy payment works, that which was to pay off those unfunded liabilities over 33 years, that it will just walk down 33 years. Every year you will be 1 year closer to being sound. So we've done 1 year, so we're at 32 years now. At the conclusion of this year, we'll be at 31 years. So that's the expectation, is that the way the legacy payment works, that you will be 1 year closer to 100% funded and to actuarially sound, more importantly here, each year that those payments are made.
So to follow up on something that Representative Schaefer asked about, we could actually make larger payments to have a less of a time frame that we're talking about the legacy payments being.
It's absolutely correct, yes.
But is it also correct that it was in statute that year, 2054, is in statute?
2054 is in Senate bill, the
How does
date
that impact
specific.
what we're just talking about then?
What it does is it just creates, because the legacy payment will grow or shrink to meet this. You will be at 0%, zero unfunded liability, 100% funded in 2054, and so that legacy payment will adjust every biennium to ensure that you land at zero unfunded liability in 2054. So
and so
that's,
you-
it's a really dynamic sort of element to
So you
Senate Bill
can-
321.
Doesn't hold you to have to, you can do it at a sooner period of time, is all I guess I'm
That's-
trying to
that is
figure out.
correct.
And what you gave us on the slide is, if we increase from 510 million a year to 600 million a year, we would save $4 billion. And if we went up to 750, we would save $8 billion.
That's correct. That's in, interest payments that you'll be paying over time because you're paying off that $14 billion in unfunded liability over a 33-year period as opposed to some shorter period.
And I know at one point, we've been, well, at multiple points, I know Representative Capriglione and others we've talked about setting up a fund with, within the ESF, spinning off of that and setting up a fund, a corpus with, that could be used for underfunded and unfunded liabilities. And with the surplus that we're going to have and a huge surplus a large amount in the ESF as well, which may be getting us to the point of having the maximum we could even have in it, that could be an opportune idea to visit again this session in terms of creating that separate fund that would allow us to make these payments and to do it sooner and save dollars in the long run for taxpayers.
That's correct.
One more question. If you can just, again, help me understand and explain to me, when you're looking at a COLA versus a 13th check, what are we talking about that we need to be cognizant of as to what is most beneficial to our state employee retirees?
Well, the cost of living adjustment is certainly more beneficial to the retirees because it's ongoing. You'll make an adjustment, whatever it is, 3%, 4%, whatever increase in their annuity. So the annuities would go up and they would stay there for the rest of their life and their survivors' lives as well. And so as long as that annuity is being paid, it'll be at that higher level. And so obviously that's longer term more helpful to them. It's more expensive because you're paying it out. You're making payments for many years compared to a 13th check. So a 13th check is certainly a known quantity. It's a finite number, and so for that, past legislators sometimes have looked at that as an easier way to derive. But you're right. The cost of living is absolutely a bigger long-term benefit to the retiree themselves.
What's the average amount retirees are getting right now?
It's about $1,700 a month.
$1,700 a month with the cost of living that we have right now. And, of course, representing Austin, knowing how expensive it is here, and so many of our state retirees are here. The COLA is something that I think, obviously we're all asked about when we hear from our constituents.
We were asked to testify at a hearing, it's been several months ago, on inflation and the impact of inflation on retirees. And the number I think that we calculated, the last time there was any benefit enhancement for ERS retirees was 2002. And so at that time, all retirees that were there in 2002, their annuities were equal to, had been adjusted for inflation. So everyone was even with the cost of living at that point, 2002. So everyone was there. But since that time, our calculation is that there's been about a 38% reduction in the purchasing power of those annuities for those that were retired in 2002. Obviously, as you retired later, it's diminished the impact of inflation on those. But since 38% reduction in the annuity since 2002 for those that were retired at that point.
I think this is my final question. I was going to look at your slide again here if I can make it open up again. But in terms of the LECOs,
Yes.
you have a slide that indicates who's included in that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see that TJJD is.
That's correct. The TJJD officers are not included in the LECOS benefit. That's correct.
And why is that?
They aren't in the statute. It's not a decision that we as an organization have made. The qualifications are set forth in statute, and they're not in statute. There have been, I know, discussions of that in the past, but again, when the fund is unsound, you can't add benefits, and you can't add new groups as well. And so that has been one of the challenges. But again, with the main fund and then the numbers that we've provided here, you get those back to sound, you can start looking to add populations or benefits as well if you want.
So you've got your first and second steps here, so a third step after we do all of that might be to consider adding these particular, we as the legislative body, I guess, could consider adding a group that also seems to fit quite nicely into the category of DPS troopers, game wardens, TABC agents, and TDCJ correctional officers.
Personally, I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Porter, and thank you to your team. Y'all have done so much for our state employees. I want to maybe build a little bit on what Representative Howard was talking about. Over and over again, I'm meeting with state agencies, and across the board, we hear staff retention and recruitment, staff retention and recruitment. From your perspective, what are you hearing about staff retention and recruitment at either in this current moment, and what could policy and or appropriations changes can we make to support that?
I mean, it's a great question. We had a lunch last week where we had some of the major agency executive directors to get together, and we talked about Group 4 and the real advantage that we think that could provide in attracting a workforce that Group 3 admittedly has had challenges recruiting to. And so I think understanding that benefit and the dynamics of that benefit has been helpful. And we've been out educating the workforce, the employers really, on how Group 4 will work so that they can clearly articulate how it will work. Health insurance, though, is a big recruitment tool as well, and we've wanted to reinforce with my colleagues at other agencies the importance of that benefit as well. A significant appropriation that the legislature makes for that. But I've heard other agencies talking about other things. But as far as we're concerned, I think the benefits, continue to hold on to the benefits is important, and getting them funded so that there is an understanding with new employees and existing employees from a retention perspective that those benefits are going to be there, and that when they retire, there is the hope that maybe those can be dynamic and grow to help offset future growth and inflation, so cost of living adjustments and those sorts of things. So getting those sound, I think, getting the pension fund sound is reinforcing to a workforce that's in place today, and then understanding sort of the nature of the new benefit, I think, is important as well.
And so in the opposite, not getting them sound or not doing these adjustments creates the opposite energy that are these as, I think there's a lot of attractiveness to a pension fund. If you're someone like me who's a public servant, like, yes, that's great. But if there is viability in that, then is it as attractive as it can be, specifically in a time when we're trying to recruit and retain staff? Does that feel accurate?
That is absolutely true.
Wonderful. And so just a little bit on the LECOS. I know I've heard a lot about it, chairing 145, but I don't think everybody knows about this. When we're talking about the specific class, like who are we talking about? Like what is a profile? Humanize the group for
Sure.
us a little bit.
I mean, these on the law enforcement side, you're talking about folks that are doing dangerous work every day. On the correction side, doing dangerous work as well. They're the work life expectancy of these folks is about 20 years because of the nature of the work that they're doing. It's challenging and stressful, and again, that's why. I think the benefits, the supplemental benefit especially, is so important, and that's the piece that's, I think, the real next important piece to address is the law enforcement custodial officer supplemental fund. That's really the piece that's seeking to compensate them in a deferred way for those challenging jobs that they do. It's that supplemental fund, that extra 20% of the benefit that they're getting through that supplemental retirement fund. So I think, that's the important piece, but these folks do really challenging work in a very stressful environment all around.
And I think the legislature recognized that last session by giving increased funding in materials, in protective gear, in even pay. But if we are leaving this part out, it's not maybe holistically taking care of our law enforcement. Does that feel accurate?
Sure. I mean, you want your workforce to have confidence that the benefits that you're providing for them are going to be there when they retire. And so having these funds, these programs actuarially sound and funded in a prudent way just reinforces that these benefits are important to you as the employers of the state workforce.
Thank you, Porter, and thank you to your team, who is very lovely all the time to work with us.
Representative Stuckey.
Thank you, Director Porter.
Yes.
The question I had was just clarification. I think I heard earlier somebody make the comment about a 13th check we can't do till we're actuarially sound, but the reality is we can do a 13th check even not being actuarially sound, correct? But we can't do a COLA till we're actuarially sound.
I mean, our perspective has been that before any benefit enhancements are provided, that you need to have the unfunded liability within that 31-year period. Our board, at the direction of the legislature, has a funding policy. We don't control the funding or the benefits,
Right.
but as a result, it's really more guidelines that our board adopts. And so their guidelines would say that the priority should be fund the plan and the unfunded liability before you do any additional benefit enhancements, and that if you do any benefit enhancements, you should pre-fund them.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, Representative Schaefer.
Thank you. How much money does ERS spend on the healthcare benefit? Big number.
Sure. It's the general appropriation is, we pay about $3 billion in claims every year.
Okay, $3 billion in claims, and that's Blue Cross Blue Shield manages that for us, right?
United does the Medicare Advantage plan, but yes, for the vast majority of the active employees, it's Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Okay.
Yes.
What kind of claims data does Blue Cross Blue Shield provide to you?
Very detailed. I mean, we have a list of claims data they're looking at, but we also have an in-house healthcare actuary that's looking at claims data, looking for trends, looking at places where there are opportunities for us to do things. So we get detailed, full files of claims data.
Do you get de-identified claims data showing this procedure was paid for at this hospital and this was the actual bill paid for that?
Yes.
And have you done any kind of analysis, outside consultant, whomever, to come in and say, are we overpaying, underpaying? I mean, that's a lot of money we're spending.
No, absolutely. We do have outside consultants that come in and talk to us about doing claims audits. We do regularly claims audit. We have a vendor that does a claims audit every year that goes through and looks at at claims that are paid, post-payment claims audit, and we'll make findings that if we have overpaid, that that will have to be made whole. And so we do that. Blue Cross does that internally as well to ensure that that what we actually pay is aligned with what should have been paid.
Okay. Do we do any kind of analysis of what we're paying relative to what Medicare rates are and private rates are?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question in regards to the ESG investing, and it's been in the news a lot. We've had attorney generals that have written a letter to BlackRock in regards to some of that. Have y'all taken a look at this within the fund? And I think there's some question as to whether or not this might be a violation of fiduciary duty. And I think it's important that we start to look forward at this to make sure that this is being, handled correctly within, I don't know that there's right now, I don't know that there's any parameter that says exactly what this is. I know there's an ESG index, I think I've heard, I've read. I'd just like to know a little bit about what y'all are doing to look at this as we sort of move forward.
Sure. Be very clear, our only objective is to earn a good risk-adjusted return for the trust, period. That is what we're looking at. That's what our board has directed us to do in policy. That is our fiduciary responsibility, is to seek out the best places we can find to generate good risk-adjusted returns for the trust. That's it. We don't have or employ an ESG funding strategy at all. We don't have any investments that are that's an element of from a strategic perspective for us at all. We're again very clear that our objective is to make money for the trust, and that our fiduciary responsibility is to seek out those investments that generate the best returns for the trust, period.
So BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, none of that.
They don't manage any of our money. Now there's a list has come out, of course, recently pursuant to Senate Bill 13 from last legislative session, and our team is looking at our holdings there, and there's a process for that. I think they're at least the early look is that the holdings in those companies are very limited, and that we'll be, again, sort of following the process in Senate Bill 13 on that very quickly.
Okay. Thank you.